Hello, I'm Margaret Martin, the creator and author of Meal Your Guide. I've published 3 books that focus on exercising intelligently as you age. My website, my books, and DVD ensure that individuals diagnosed with osteoporosis and osteopenia can feel confident moving. My guest today is Dr. Todd Cooperman. In 1999, Dr. Cooperman founded Consumer Lab. This is a lab that evaluates, or it's actually a website now that evaluates consumer products relating to health, wellness, and nutrition, including vitamins and minerals, which is one of the topics we're going to discuss today. I joined Consumer Lab personally as a member when researching vitamins, and I've been very impressed with the detailed reports and reviews that accompany each product that I look up. Dr. Cooperman, my patients and readers are very concerned about their bones, which is why they reach out to me, and the calcium controversy surrounding supplements. However, I don't always feel comfortable answering these questions, and professionally I really shouldn't be answering these questions because I'm a physical therapist. So I'd like listeners to understand Consumer Lab a little bit more and why I felt compelled to reach out for your expertise.
Well, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So, could you share with listeners what Consumer Lab's mission is?
Sure. So as you mentioned, in 1999, I saw a need for consumers to really understand what was in the bottle, really, when they're buying a supplement. There had been reports out in various newspapers based on limited testing showing that there were some issues with contamination in herbal supplements, of vitamins that didn't have what they claimed. And so I brought on board a researcher from the FDA who had been testing supplements for the government, which doesn't really do a lot of testing here in the U.S. It really just does a lot of firefighting when there are big issues. And started Consumer Lab to really go out on our own, buy products, test them, and report on them. And we're funded by our subscribers. We have over 80,000 individuals, and many libraries and other institutions subscribe as well. And we every 3 weeks we put out another report on another type of either supplement or a healthy food. For example, we just put out a report on canned tuna versus canned salmon, and really the omega-3s and contaminants, mercury that are in there. Next week we'll be putting out a report on glucosamine and chondroitin supplements and boswellia and some others that relate to things that you get involved in.
Great. Well, you mentioned it briefly, but I understand at Consumer Lab that the products you test are purchased on the open market rather than have companies send you samples. So could you tell me and the readers, listeners, why you chose to do it this way?
Sure, and it's pretty obvious. We don't want to be influenced or have a bias. So we go out and buy the products in stores, increasingly online, because that's how people are buying it. We buy from even multi-level marketers, from healthcare professionals, etc., just as a consumer would. So we wanted the product really in the same state that a consumer would get it. And that's important because if a manufacturer sent you a product, it would be from some recently made batch from their facility. It's not going to reflect the kinds of things that can happen to supplements during transit and other things like that. And we've certainly seen issues like that over the years, like probiotics that are kept in a warehouse at a high temperature and lose the viable organisms that they contained originally.
But everywhere you turn, you're concerned, like everybody else, and I'm concerned about the credibility of the information that we read, whether it be the news or nutritional supplements. And I'm impressed that Consumer Lab doesn't directly sell any supplements. And so, and secondly, that you use independent third-party labs to test for strength, purity, and how easily products are absorbed into the body. So could you briefly explain how you test for those things, for the strength, the purity, and the ability of the product to break down?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, how we do the testing is we go out like a consumer and purchase these products off the shelves, online, really any way a consumer would. And we decided years ago, 1999 when we started, that since there are so many different products that we test, so many different types, so many different tests that we need to conduct, it made more sense, rather than trying to do some testing for mercury this week and hold off, and not do it again for another month. We use laboratories to just focus on these issues. So there's laboratories that do heavy metal testing. There are laboratories that test for oils. So with a fish oil, for example, it may go to one laboratory for the heavy metals, another for the PCBs to test for that type of contaminant, another for the omega-3 levels, EPA and DHA, and yet another possibly for rancidity or freshness. In-house, we do just one basic test, which is testing for the disintegration of tablets, because that needs to be done in so many different products that we test. So we do that one in-house. And we're constantly evaluating the quality of these laboratories and making sure they're doing it right. And if we find a problem, we send it out to another laboratory for confirmation before we ever publish those results. So we want to make sure we have it right. And, we've tested over 5,000 products since 1999. We've never been sued because we do such a really good job making sure that our information is correct, before we ever publish it.
Well, that's really good, because it's going into a kind of a pointed question here on a particular product. So, and I've been approached by this company, the company is AlgaeCal, to do a blog on their product. So readers have asked me as well, what do I think of this supplement or that supplement? And so when I came across Consumer Lab, I thought, wow, you guys are the ones to answer these questions for me. So having, read on your site that AlgaeCal didn't pass the test for toxicity, I thought it best for you to explain to the readers and to the clients of mine that take this product why you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable about them taking it, and to discuss the testing that occurred with this supplement.
Sure. So we've tested AlgaeCal twice, at least twice. I know in 2017 and earlier than that, 2015. And I should clarify, we haven't found toxicity with this product. We have what we have found as an issue is that it has had higher levels of lead than is acceptable to us. And when I say to us, we're using some of the most stringent requirements in terms of purity. For example, the state of California, it's really the only state in all the United States that has a limit on the amount of lead that should be in a supplement per day, per daily serving. And that's a very stringent limit. It's 0.5 microgram of lead per day. And we apply that to the supplements we test. We give, some leeway. And if a product actually contains minerals like AlgaeCal does, it contains calcium and magnesium, we give it a little more leeway because minerals may inherently have some type of contaminant in them. So we give them a little extra room there. But even with that, in 2015, AlgaeCal actually failed our test for lead. And I believe it had about 5 micrograms per daily serving at that point. We actually tested it again in 2017 and found less, which was a very good thing because sometimes manufacturers don't care, and they just kind of go on. But in our latest testing, it contained between 1 and 2 micrograms of lead. That's really not a toxicity issue at all for an adult. It's better to avoid lead. As the FDA says, there is no safe level of lead, and if you're going to go out and buy a supplement, you may as well buy one that's as pure as possible. Lead accumulates in your bones. It kind of replaces other minerals in your bone, and you can store it up. And if you become, you develop osteoporosis, some of that lead will leach back out. So you just don't want lead. So that's the issue that we did find with AlgaeCal. I believe it may have had a little less of one of the minerals that it claimed, maybe 25% or something. I have to check and double check that. But I know it was a little low on one of the minerals and a little high on the lead.
Okay.
If you're getting calcium from your diet and a sufficient quantity, absolutely not. I would not take calcium from a supplement. Food is definitely the way to go with calcium, is to the degree that you can, and most people can. If you are going to turn to a supplement for calcium, a few things to be aware of. One, you can't absorb really more than 500 milligrams in a dose at a certain at a specific time. So there's no point in taking more. In fact, people who do take higher doses, they have increased risk of various vascular issues, stroke, etc. So you want to keep it down. Frankly, I would suggest keeping it even lower than 500, maybe trying to stick to 300 milligrams or so per dose, because you don't want that huge amount of calcium all of a sudden hitting your body. That's really the beauty of getting calcium from food, is that you're absorbing it more slowly. So you're not all of a sudden getting this huge amount of calcium into your blood, which your body may not know what to do with, other than maybe stick it into some plaque somewhere. So keep calcium to a minimum if you can. Don't expect to get calcium from a multivitamin, because calcium is a very bulky mineral in terms of the amount that you need. You need hundreds of milligrams per day versus, say, zinc or iron, where you're talking about single digits. So you're not going to be able to fit enough calcium into a multivitamin unless it's very bulky. So you typically are going to take calcium as a separate supplement.
So a couple things I'm going to ask you on what you just said. So when you said you're aiming more towards the 300, and if you have too much, you might get some calcium deposits in your joints, or is that kind of the things that how your body deals with too much calcium?
Well, there is an association between calcium supplement use, especially higher amounts, and stroke. So the evidence is there that there's, calcium can be a problem if you're taking too much from a supplement. You don't see that problem when you're getting calcium from food. Even people who eat a ton of calcium from food, they're not seeing that same problem. So again, as I said, I would minimize, calcium supplementation, and only, if you need to turn to it, keep it at a moderate, amount per serving and hopefully per day.
Okay, so then this is another question that comes. So when people say getting it from food, so certain foods have it naturally, and certain foods have it added to it.
Right.
So are they considered equal?
No. It's an
okay.
excellent question. Yeah. So, orange juice with added calcium, that's the same as taking it from a supplement.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yeah. And that actually, if you look at the actual tables from the Institute of Medicine, which sets the RDIs, the RDAs, the upper limits, all that for calcium and other minerals and vitamins, it specifically says that right there. It says, this does not include, calcium from food, but really calcium from supplements or foods to which calcium has been added.
So maybe this is a good time to go into, I was going to ask you about the two most common types of calcium that we see on the market, the citrate and the carbonate.
Right. I mean, you can be fine. Be fine taking calcium carbonate. If you have less acidity in your stomach, as some older people do, it may be harder to absorb calcium carbonate. So calcium citrate is often recommended. And that's generally our feeling as well, that if you're going to choose one, probably a calcium citrate is a better form for most people. But the only downside with calcium citrate is it's even bulkier.
Okay, so you have more tablet to take.
Yeah, exactly. More tablets, bigger tablets.
But the absorption issue with the carbonate, if it's in with food, because that's when your stomach's producing more stomach acid with, when you're ingesting food, then does that, I guess, negate or, balance off the
I suppose it could, but I think that they've done studies looking at various ways. Calcium citrate tends to come out ahead. Higher. But again, you can certainly be fine, with calcium carbonate. You often see this with in the supplement area, where a company has one form and they try to make it sound like the other forms are terrible. All these forms will give you calcium. You just may be a little better off with the citrate, for older people.
Okay. So because a lot of people get osteoporosis postmenopausal, and so when they're asking, what is the best calcium supplement to take, then steering them more towards the citrate is maybe a bit better, because they have less stomach acid. Would you?
Yeah, and the class isn't all that different. If in our, I have to look at our report, but in our report on calcium, our review, where we've tested dozens of calcium supplements, our top pick is a calcium citrate, or citrate, as you say in Canada, supplement. So how much is, to say, 500 milligrams of calcium? Even though we said that's high, how much does 500 milligrams cost from different products? Mm-hmm. So the product that we found to be of high quality, calcium citrate, 4 cents for 500 milligrams.
Wow.
So, as I said, pennies per day. There are other products, some food-based calcium. I see one here, $2.52 for 500 milligrams of calcium. We're often asked which brands are best, which is, important to what we do. And I can't say generally one brand is always better than another. It's really very product specific. But I can say that you can often get a very good supplement, at very low cost from some of these big, chain stores that are out there, because they usually push their suppliers very hard if they have a big reputation to maintain. So you don't have to spend a lot, to get a vitamin or a mineral supplement. Usually you can get them, pennies per day. And that's another thing that we do on Consumer Lab, is we're not only testing the products, but obviously, trying to help people figure out where's the best value, with these supplements. Yeah, well, actually, there's two pieces to that. One is if it's calcium carbonate or calcium citrate. So basically, you think of it, the calcium's linked to the citrate in a sense, or the calcium's, linked to the carbonate, right? So that bond has to be broken, before you can get your calcium free, so you can absorb it. So that's the issue with absorption, and how it can vary a little bit, with one form of a mineral versus another. Now you're also getting to like competition for absorption when you're taking calcium with something else. Calcium, just because you're taking so much of it, again, hundreds of milligrams versus single milligrams for other minerals sometimes, it will compete with those, and the ones that are at the lower dose are going to lose out. So you need to be mindful of that when you're taking calcium supplements. If you're also trying to take another mineral that's at a lower strength dose, you probably want to take them at separate times of day, at least 2-3 hours apart.
So you did mention taking it throughout the day, so that's great. And I know years ago they would say taking it before bed, and I believe that isn't as important anymore as they once thought. But I guess if you're trying to fit it in, it's not a bad time.
They're just because we're talking about vitamins, and we'll probably talk about vitamin D, since that always goes along with calcium. Vitamin D you want to take with a fatty meal. Calcium doesn't really matter, but vitamin D you certainly do. You can increase your absorption by up to 50%, by taking it along with a fatty meal.
And that's calcium, because it's a fat soluble vitamin, so it's looking to link to fat, or
that's what one would think.
Oh, okay.
But the actual reason for that is if you're eating a fatty meal, it's stimulating bile production. And the bile is what you need to break up that fat so it can be absorbed. So by taking it with a fatty meal, you're getting an injection of bile, into your GI system, and that bile is then going to break up, is going to allow for that vitamin D to be absorbed better. So some people think, I'll take my vitamin D with a fish oil capsule, because it has some fat in it. But that's not enough. If you're taking them at the same time, it's not going to make a difference. You really want to, get your juices flowing a little earlier, and take your vitamin D, after a meal or during a meal. But you need a decent amount of oils not just one little capsule, probably to get the full benefit of that. So it's better to take it with a meal.
I have some questions about elemental calcium and just understanding that, because I get clients that come and then they say that the doctors told them to look for supplements that state the amount of elemental calcium. Okay.
So basically, when you look at a supplement, at least in the United States, they have kind of a nutrition facts panel on the back. A supplement facts panel. Nutrition facts would be on a food. And what you'll see there for calcium, it should say calcium. Then in parentheses, it'll say, from calcium carbonate or as calcium carbonate or just calcium carbonate. And then it'll show the amount, 300 milligrams.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. So what it's saying is you're getting 300 milligrams of calcium from, calcium carbonate. Occasionally, and this is not that common, we have seen it. We saw it with a liquid kind of calcium magnesium product a couple of times. They'll mislabel it, and they'll say 300 milligrams, but they're really talking about the amount of calcium carbonate, calcium citrate, whatever. So you're really only getting a fraction of that as calcium. So calcium citrate, and I'd have to look at the actual percentages, but let's say it's 50% calcium, just for for discussion's sake. So if you're getting so if it's 50% calcium and you want 300 milligrams of calcium from your supplement, that means you need 600 milligrams of calcium citrate in this situation, right?
So when people are let's go back when you said people shouldn't take more than 300 to 500 at one time. Is that the amount of elemental calcium or the amount of?
So all the recommendations are based on the elemental, just the calcium. So elemental means just the calcium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's all it means. Okay.
Yeah, it's rare that you're just going to get calcium all by itself in a supplement. Mm-hmm. And compounds, minerals are often unstable. You really can't often get a mineral just calcium. It's going to be bound to something that's going to keep it stable. But fortunately, the way the supplements are typically labeled is it's telling you the amount of elemental calcium, the kind of the just calcium that you're going to get from that product. It's not going to, you don't care about how much of that other stuff, the citrate or the carbonate, is in there.
So if a calcium supplement doesn't have the amount of elemental calcium indicated in the, on the bottle,
first of all,
we're going to assume, sorry?
Yeah, it has to.
It has to. But will it say it separately? You're just saying whatever it says is elemental calcium. So my bottle downstairs says calcium citrate, 300 milligrams. Nowhere on the bottle can I find the words elemental calcium.
Right, and you won't. But
okay.
what it probably does say is not calcium citrate 300 milligrams. What it probably says is calcium, then in parentheses, calcium citrate, or from calcium citrate, or as calcium citrate.
Okay.
And then it'll say 300 milligrams.
So we shouldn't disregard a product because it doesn't have the words elemental calcium on it. Right.
Don't look for the word elemental on there. It won't be there.
Okay.
Just make sure that it says calcium, and then in parentheses, whatever the form is, and then the amount after the parentheses. That means they're referring to the amount of actual calcium, or just calcium or elemental calcium that's in there.
So I know I didn't throw this question at you ahead of time, but now that you're making me, see the minerals on their mineral level, what happens to citrate and carbonate in our bodies?
That's a good question. I have a feeling, they're innocuous. I don't know specifically how they're metabolized, but I wouldn't worry about those.
Okay.
There are things in supplements, you can worry about that are added, like something that's in a lactate form, right? So that's actually going to be lactose. That's going to be separated. And if you're lactose intolerant, that's an issue. So, aside from those kinds of things, I wouldn't really worry about it.
Oh, very good. So, you're segueing in very well into my next question, which was, interactions, like the lactose. I wouldn't have thought of that for lactose intolerant people. So can calcium or certain forms of calcium make other drugs less effective?
Yes, and I wish I knew offhand. Again, I know it's in our report on calcium, our review of calcium supplements, but there are definitely drug interactions and most definitely interactions with other mineral, supplements, especially minerals that you're taking at low amounts. So, think of calcium as like the king of the minerals. You actually you need even more phosphorus and calcium, but you get plenty of that from your food, so it's not something that people supplement with. But in terms of beyond that, calcium is like the king. That's the thing you're getting the most of, and it's just going to crowd out, your ability to absorb other minerals during that period when you're absorbing the calcium.
Okay, so I guess on the safety, as we should be doing with everything, if we're taking something new, or even here in Ontario, we're very lucky. The Ontario government covers us for sitting down with our pharmacists and just going through what are we taking on a supplement level, on a drug level, and interactions, and so that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. That's great because we don't have that here.
No.
In the US. I mean, you can ask your pharmacist, but they're not obligated. And it's not, the trouble with supplements, particularly in the US, is there's a lot of information on the label that they don't have to put on there, and they're not going to put on there, like these drug interactions, like how much is too much. There are these upper limits that have been established for just about every vitamin and mineral. Some don't have it yet, but that information you won't find on a supplement.
Because we talked about how calcium was best taken in isolation to other minerals, but I guess vitamin D is one of those things that it's okay to take with calcium? Because often you'll see them come together, right? You
can certainly take them together. There's no interaction. One's a fat-soluble vitamin, the other one's a mineral. So basically, the things that interact are minerals interact with minerals, and fat-soluble vitamins interact with fat-soluble vitamins. You wouldn't want to take vitamin K when you're taking vitamin D. K will lose out, and there have been studies showing that. So with the fat-soluble vitamins, again, if you're taking a lot of one, it can compete with another.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you won't get any of the other one. It'll just decrease it. So it's not the end of the world. People take multivitamins all the time with all these different ingredients. It's just that it's not the ideal way to take it, but it is certainly a convenient way to take it.
And I alluded to this question because I'm almost done my calcium questions. But the difference between taking calcium in liquid versus chewable versus solid, do you have a preference based on bioavailability or otherwise?
If it's a well-made tablet, it's perfectly fine. It's just as good as taking it as a liquid. It'll take a few minutes longer to disintegrate so that you can absorb it, but it should be perfectly fine. You don't need to take it as a liquid. If you have trouble swallowing pills, take it as a liquid. That's fine. Okay. We tend to find more quality issues with liquids than tablets, interestingly. I'm just thinking of some examples of some prominent liquid calcium magnesium supplements where we've found that they just didn't really have the level that they claimed on the label. But absorption-wise, you can be fine either way. From time to time, I'd say less than 5% of the time, maybe we'll find a tablet that really won't break apart properly.
So on the liquid question, because I remember years ago hearing about this, and so when you're testing a liquid product, you're obviously having to shake it up really well to make sure that the sample you're testing is kind of even through and through. So when people are taking, if they decide, I'm going to get my calcium supplement in the orange juice in the morning, do they have to shake the orange juice so the calcium gets dispersed in that orange juice? Is it heavy? Does it settle?
I would shake it. I definitely would. I don't know I think it's calcium citrate that's in there. I don't think it's settling and causing a sediment in there. But just in case, I would shake it up.
I do have one last question, if you don't mind. It's a bit of a personal question. Yeah. And you're testing supplements all the time, vitamins, minerals, and foods. So in the arena of supplements, do you take any? And may I ask I mean, which ones?
Right.
Because
Well,
you're
it's like,
in our age category.
right. So when I was a teenager, I worked as a busboy in a catering hall, and I would never eat in that catering hall.
Okay.
So I'm very, very careful and picky with myself and my family in terms of supplements. So I don't take any supplement routinely, and also, I mean, I'm constantly reading about nutrition and all that. So I'm trying to get everything I possibly can from food. I take a little bit of vitamin B12 because I'm over 50, and so your absorption of B12 can fall again due to changes in your GI tract over the age of 50. So that's something that you really need to take from a supplement. I take a little melatonin if my sleep pattern is kind of out of whack. And there I would take a very small amount. You really need only about 1 milligram or even less for kids of melatonin, though some people will take 5, 10, 20 milligrams. And they're showing, actually negative effects on bone with taking high doses of melatonin, like 20 milligrams daily. They can have a negative effect.
It's good to know.
Yeah. So, and my kids might take melatonin. My wife, again, as needed. Usually, my kids might take it on a Sunday night before school starts up again. On Monday when they've been staying up late. It really does help you fall asleep. It kind of triggers that for sure. I don't really take much else. I might take a little iron if I give blood. It's been shown that you really don't recover your iron as quickly as they say after a blood donation. And my daughters and wife will take iron, especially my daughters if they're a little iron deficient. So that's about it with the supplements here.
Okay. So thank you very much. You too. Have a great weekend.
Right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.